Welcome to the Tapestry of Life. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services at Community College of Philadelphia. Today's topic is Recovery High School. In general, Recovery High Schools advocate for the promotion, strengthening, and expansion of secondary and post-secondary programs designed for students and families committed to achieving success in both education and recovery. Recovery High Schools require that all students enrolled in the program be in recovery and working a program of recovery determined by the student and the school. To discuss this topic today, I want to welcome Rebecca Bonner, the Executive Director of the Bridgeway School, Pete McGovern, Clinical Director of the Bridgeway School, and Sean Smith, who is a clinician in Advocate Associates. Welcome to all of you. Rebecca, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history and where it came from. It's, believe me when I tell you, this is a very exciting issue coming to Philadelphia, and I want to really congratulate all of you for the effort that you've put in to get it started.
Thanks very much. And I want to say that that was a really excellent description that you gave of recovery schools. It's not a brand new idea. It is very new to Philadelphia, but recovery schools have existed for about 30 years around the country. Many of them started in Hazelden. It started in Minnesota with the help of Hazelden, which is a fairly well-known treatment center.
Yeah. Wonderful material they put out too, the Hazelden Foundation.
They do. And they've been a wonderful source, along with the Association of Recovery Schools, in helping us determine how we're going to build our program and how we have built our program. The way it came to Philadelphia was that one of my daughters is in recovery. She developed an opiate addiction when she was a freshman in high school. And she went into treatment at Caron Treatment Center out in Warnersville. And while she was there, her father, her stepmother, and I were racking our brains, what do we do with her when she gets out of school? Where does she go? Because the sad fact is that 8 out of 10 kids who return to their prior high school relapse, often within the first 6 months. And by the end of that first year, up to 50% are using at similar or greater levels than they were using before they went into treatment. So the odds of a student going back to their regular high school, people, places, and things, it's just deadly to a kid who's in early recovery. Unfortunately, there wasn't a school in the program. The closest one to us at that time, and still, is in Boston. And I'm an educator by trade, and I started thinking that there was a real need for this program in our area. And we've done, as I said, very much from the help of the Association of Recovery Schools and the other schools that are already existing in the country.
You know, we often talk, you mentioned, in 12-step program, we talk about people, places, things.
Right.
And we also, a lot of people forget the fourth trailer to that, situations, which is perfect in the sense of high schools.
Right.
And what seems to be happening in the schools.
Oh, and with the increase in prescription drug use and abuse, high schools have often become the pharmacy of choice for many of our high school students.
What I've often found interesting is that it tries to combine the best of recovery and the best of education. And I think that's really the unique thing about it. And I know Pete is a clinical director, and I was wondering, how do you see this kind of interacting, this idea?
I think it's the ideal interaction for this population. I've been working with adolescents with drug and alcohol problems for over 14 years. And what really started putting my focus on this is I started at inpatient level of care and worked in a partial and then to an intensive outpatient, which is after school for 2 hours a day, 4 times a week. In that period, we found that a lot of the adolescents were coming in, they were motivated, they wanted it, they were well-intended, and as mentioned, I'm up here talking about people, places, and things, and we are sending them back to the same location every single day where they're being triggered, they're hitting situations, and of course they're around their peers who, that's a very strong influence for them. A lot of them don't need a whole lot of pressure to get what they want to get, and they're pretty motivated to do what they want to do and get what they want to get. But with some, with the influence that they get from the people around them, even when they're well-intended, It's just a very strong influence. So
peer-
being around a population, to
Yeah.
answer your question, that is all on the same track in a small community, I think is ideal.
Yeah, and it's kind of positive peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
When they return to their community, basically, especially adolescents, I mean, the whole idea of being overwhelmed by drinking and drug taking and all that goes along with it. I've often thought that probably the most difficult people to deal with in the sense of treating them have been adolescents because the relapse rates were just so traditionally high.
They're staggering.
Yeah, they're staggering.
If you look at the development of adolescents, one of the core things is for them to gain independence. And, everybody talks about adolescence and the rebellion and all that. In a way, that kind of contradicts early recovery, because in early recovery, we talk about surrendering. They're kind of like fight, 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 and we're saying you need to surrender to this. So being able to turn that over is not an easy task. So when they see people that are a positive influence, when they do see people that they kind of think are, hip, slick, and cool, and edgy, and they're doing it, and they're happy, that positive influence is really what helps them gain momentum and to begin to change internally and take a look at themselves.
Yeah.
Now with that being said, if they have 2,000 kids and 50% of them are experimenting with something at certain levels, it's really like swimming upstream.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if I can add to that, we would never ask an adult who's in early recovery to go back to tending bar where he was
Right.
tending when he went
True.
into treatment.
Right.
But we do that every day with kids when we ask them to go back to their high school.
Well, I think that's very true. I don't necessarily want to mention the school board, but I mentioned to you that I was elected twice to one of the school districts outside of the city. And the subcommittee I managed, or that I was the chair of, had to deal with student activities. And believe me, the failure rates from people coming back into the system around drugs and alcohol was staggering to the point where it was overwhelming. So the thought that a new high school that is particularly sensitive not only to the educational issues but also the recovery issues, my hat's off to you. I mean,
thank
really,
you.
in the sense of
Thanks.
what you're trying to do. My question is, what is different? Before I get to, I haven't said anything to Sean because he'll talk a little bit about, because I know he's in the treatment community. We'll get to him in a second. What is different? I mean, why this program? I know it's new, and we'll talk a little bit about how it's getting started and all. But what is uniquely different? I mean, I mentioned the fact that there's recovery mixed with education, but how would a typical day?
One difference is going to be that the major criteria for our students is going to be that you're stepping down from an inpatient or a placement, and or you're coming from an outpatient facility like Sean's facility, where they can confirm that you've been clean for 30 days or 60 days. The cutoff is really going to be 30. And the purpose for that is really just to kind of get some of that resistance. As everyone says, this population is so difficult to work with, and that 4 weeks of sobriety gets that out of the way. In reality, when these kids show up and they're treated with respect and they're given opportunities, it's really amazing how quickly they rise to the opportunity, and that resistance really goes to the wayside. Put in a certain setting and spoken to in a certain manner, they're going to be resistant, But probably if there's going to be one mantra through our school is respect, and respect given is respect earned. And
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, I think there are a couple of things that make us stand apart from traditional schools, and even some of the really good independent schools in the city they're dealing well with kids in recovery. They're small enough that they can serve the needs of the academic needs and provide the recovery supports for kids in early recovery. However, I think what makes us stand apart is that not only do we get recovery, much of our staff is in recovery or has in some way they are, or their families have dealt with addiction and abuse. We honor it. We know what a hard road it is for kids who are in early recovery, and so not only do we provide the recovery supports and respect students for the journey that they're embarking on, we really honor it. Yeah. And we provide a really solid academic program at the same time. Our day starts with a morning meeting and check-in. We offer...
When you say a morning meeting, you mean like a recovery meeting?
Well, not
Or
a
an
12-step
education?
meeting, but you
kind
want to
of
describe that?
We're going to have a check-in and a check-out.
Oh,
And
okay.
in between the day, we're going to have more what would be a therapeutic group.
Oh, okay.
We adopt 12-step beliefs, attitudes, philosophies. But the morning check-in is really going to be about, did John or Jane just have a complete yelling match with their parents prior to coming into school that morning, and do they need to be pulled aside if they look like they're coming in like a bear? And
So
we
it's
have
like
to
a
set-
community meeting,
Yeah.
more,
Yes.
To
which
kinda-
we do have in some of the programs where they kind of like
Exactly.
get into the whole discussion about what happened yesterday and what happened before you came here, and
Right.
and if it's a real particular problem, we take them and bring them over to a counselor and start their day, and or however
Exactly.
you might.
Exactly.
Also, the purpose of that meeting would be to read some literature, and that would be 12-step literature,
Okay.
which would be a daily meditation. Because we are, like I said, we're going to take from the principles and the tenets of 12-step programs. So part of that is about prayer and meditation, and of course, a higher power of their choosing. But there will be that meditation. Part, because this is it is a spiritual.
Experience. I'll get back to that in a second.
Yes.
Sean, you hear this whole story, and I know you're kind of on the outside as a counselor, therapist, addiction counselor, I assume, from what we
Yes.
talked about. How do you see yourself interacting? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, first of all?
Okay, I am a therapist at Adolescent Advocates, which is located in Bryn Mawr, and we deal with high school and college age kids with addiction issues and mental health and addictions. They usually go hand in hand. And
The comorbidity story, as they say.
comorbidity, absolutely. And so we believe that, a place like us could verify that a child has been sober 30, 60 days, whatever it may be. So the cutoff probably 30. We can verify that and then work together in conjunction with Recover School,
Recover School.
absolutely, and feed into it. And also they would be coming back to us usually, at night to keep, to touch base with us, but mostly in the school.
I know it's just starting up, and we'll talk a little bit about your startup and what's going on. But I'm assuming one of the other advantages is that you have the school that's integrated in the two areas that we talked about, and also the outside agencies that make the referrals are integrated also, which is actually very unique
Right.
in the school district.
Yes.
And in effect, it's seamless, I assume. They start in the morning, they go through the day, and then there might be some activities after school. I assume it's a longer day than normal because of after school activities are really centered around recovery, et cetera. And then maybe some programs might be outside the school, back in the facility. Who does the drug testing? Oh, you know what? I mentioned that because early recovery, we need to keep them honest, as they say.
That's
do
right.
the drug testing.
Yes,
So
we will be verifying through laboratory urinalysis, and they'll be random and frequent and documented, as we say. So the purpose of that really is just to solidify the culture of honesty. Honesty being one of the keys, really the principle behind the first step of 12-step programs. So to me and all of us, I think that we're all on board with the idea that that is the number one principle that we have to cultivate. People stop using, but that doesn't mean their behavior stops. So they come in, they're still manipulative. They still want what they want when they want it. And letting them know they're in an environment where they can get honest, and it's going to be okay, and we're going to work through it, and we're not just going to say, all right, thank you for your honesty, there's the door.
Right.
To them is going to be part of the power.
Yeah,
and I'll make a couple other assumptions based on my own experiences in treatment, is that when they relapse from a positive drug screen, they don't really get thrown out. See, in the school district that I was with, they would you'd be suspended for 45 days. I don't know what that accomplishes. They wind up having a vacation, the kids, on some levels. But I
Right.
mean, in your case, what I assume you do is you deal more directly with, if you want to use the word denial, or the way they rationalize and the way they go forward, so they don't really get out of the school. They
We-
really get more intensely in the school because
Right.
of the
Correct.
Perfect.
We have distinct protocols.
Oh, okay.
Depending on whether a kid is honest and comes to us and says, I slipped up over the weekend, but I want to get back on track. Versus if we find out through drug testing or through another student, that's more severe, and that will require reworking contracts and things like that. We really want to foster, as Pete said, we want to foster people's commitment to honesty, because that's one of the key problems with the disease.
Yeah, that's right.
Our students, they do have a desire to do well. They do have a desire to stop using. Given the opportunity and the right environment to get honest, they're going to do it. The truth is, most of them are going to get honest just by putting the urine drug screen up on the desk and saying, you got something to tell me?
Yeah.
What happened over the weekend? I got a call from your mother. I got a call from Sean. What's going on? And that will give them the opportunity to get honest. And of course, we'll confirm and verify and do all that. But the reality is, getting clean and recovery isn't about the result of a drug screen. Drugs and alcohol aside, there's a lot of attitudes and behaviors that need to change after that.
True.
And that's really what we're shooting for, And we have the unique opportunity of having so many skilled treatment providers around us that we can say when they're leaving school and they're going to adolescent advocates, and I can follow up and say, hey, you know what, Sean? John had a really bad day today. Can you keep an eye on him? Sure, no problem. And vice versa. So it's really a luxury to have that.
Oh yeah, the
to
continuity
have
of
that
care is
model.
really significant.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
it is.
so we're going to try to collaborate with as many clinicians as possible in the area just to really strengthen that recovery movement for adolescents and young people.
And this is pretty compatible, I guess, with adolescent advocates.
Absolutely,
In the
it
sense
is. It totally is. In our program, we use the group. The group is tremendous. As they were saying with their peers, and when their peers are doing, positive things and staying clean. You said that positive peer pressure, and that's totally what they're talking about as well. And we do lots of things at our place that have to do with, with schooling and making sure that the kids are doing their work. But it's not exactly like the recovery school that they're having. With actually teaching the classes and things like that. We have a couple of, I personally am an educator, but I do adolescent advocates part-time. I'm not at adolescent advocates teaching classes. We make sure the kids do their homework and get caught up on work. At times it's nothing like what they have. So it really is going to be perfect in conjunction, place of ours with them.
Working in the regular school district, I guess.
Yes.
From what I understood
Yes,
from the
I-
conversation. So
yes.
you're a certified teacher, I assume.
Yes.
Secondary or elementary ed.
Secondary,
Secondary ed?
yes.
So you have both the advantages of seeing a regular school
Yes.
and being certified as a teacher, and also having the experiences of being a counselor therapist, in which you're working with Recovery High School.
Yes.
And I assume you see some difference.
A ton of difference. What they have is so positive for adolescence and addiction, and like you were saying with the school board, a lot of times there is zero tolerance in the public schools in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's absolute zero tolerance, and it's not helping the kids just to throw them out.
You're right.
And it does nothing for the problem. With addressing the root of the problem, where what their school will do is completely address that root, and work on it therapeutically, as well as take care of the academic requirements and to further them along,
When we were getting ready to start, when we were thinking about whether or not this idea could work in Philadelphia, one of the first things we did was talk to as many treatment providers as we could. And probably the single most frustration that we heard from folks was that they could serve well the kids when they got them at 3:30, 4:30, whatever time they got them after school. But what was happening during the school day was negating almost all of the positive work that they could do after school hours, because the majority of their time was spent in a school where, I mean, like it or not, there's a lot of drug use. I think the most recent stats are that 1 in 4 high school students in Philadelphia has either bought, used, been asked to buy, or sold. So that's 25% of the students having that level of contact with drugs. Putting a kid back there in early recovery is just, it's
catastrophic.
It's catastrophic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it
it
is.
is.
It really is.
It is.
I think it is.
That was part of the frustration as an intensive outpatient therapist in the community. And like I said, the kids come in, there's going to be some that aren't ready yet, without a doubt. But a lot of them want to make changes. And it's getting sober as an adolescent or as an adult is challenging. There's roadblocks to recovery, and really taking those roadblocks out of it and making it an achievable versus a catastrophic situation is the goal here. The public school systems, as a clinician, I was in and out of them all the time. They're very good at what they do. They have 2,000 people to keep an eye on. We're going to have 12. It's a little bit different. It's very specific, our purpose. The kids in recovery, or the kids that are in recovery that were in the high schools, when they're in their active addictions, they're not, walking around waving a flag. Addicts are very good at staying undercover and being manipulative, as we all know, and they do a good job of hiding. And a lot of them academically stay where they need to be. They might not be hitting their, potential, but they're still, at a level that's not raising flags. And they're really experts at doing that. Okay. So it's not until usually a crisis situation where they come into someone like me, and then we begin treatment, and it's back and forth every day, or back up at the inpatient and back. The luxury that we're going to have as a school is really just the longitudinal, the amount of time that we're going to experience with the student. Even if they go one semester at 4 months is usually a longer period of time than they're going to be in the average intensive outpatient and inpatient programs. If a student chooses to stay a year, 2 years, or 4 years, the relationships they're going to build and the strength and that shared experience and that fellowship that they're gaining at the high school is going to be invaluable to them.
So we talked earlier about the beginning of the day and what it was like, and the fact that there was these kinds of community meetings, and then the experience started from there. I was wondering if you can fill in a little bit of that story for us.
We followed very closely the model of Archway Academy in Texas, and you and I both met Sasha McLean, who's the director of the school in Houston. And in addition to some really impressive statistics on success of their students, there are a number of students there who have been able to convey their stories about what a difference a recovery school has made in their life. There was one young woman who's she graduated this past June. She's the first one in her family to have gone beyond 8th grade and to graduate. And she would take the bus an hour and a half each way to school in Houston because being in a sober environment was so critical for her success that she was willing to do that. Part
of that story is that last year they reported an 85% success rate with students staying sober for the year. That really inverts the rates that we have in our field at the moment in traditional treatment. The relapse rate is usually 85%.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're showing success rates of that, which really speaks to the model and the community and the relationships that these students are building over time. If an adolescent, sometimes kids come in my program, they have a hard time making it 2 blocks to my group when they first start out. This girl's taking public transportation for an hour and a half every day.
Do they come from families that there's a lot of addiction in, or a lot of dysfunction?
This particular young woman did. There's always dysfunction, but this particular young woman came from a family with a history of addiction, and so for her to graduate sober was a huge accomplishment.
Sean and I can share stories of success with adolescents in recovery for sure, and hopefully you'll be able to share more in the future. And but we just attended the Recovery School Convention in Cleveland, Ohio last week, and I was speaking with a young man from Minnesota who his mother and father were both in their active addictions, addiction and alcoholism, and I forget his origin of how he initiated getting into the school, but it was really self-initiated, him getting into a recovery school in Minnesota, which has is really kind of leading the way in the movement. Minnesota and Texas have quite a few. This young man put himself through the recovery school. It's a public, and he did receive a scholarship. And at the moment, he is at a recovering sober living environment in college. So he transitioned from the high school, the recovery high school, into the sober living environment that a lot of universities are offering. And of course, Rutgers is very well known for those around this area.
As a recovery high school.
But he had a very powerful story, and he had kind of been all around in his addiction, out to California as a surfer, and then he'd come back and he'd live in Colorado and just...
Is it a pretty broad spectrum of drugs that the students come with? I mean, you treat adolescents, you're in with adolescents. What are kind of some of... When you would make a referral into this system, what kind of a history would that person have?
I mean, really, the disease of addiction does not discriminate. They could be wealthy, they could be living in poverty, you know, they could be middle class, come from middle class families, single parent households, you know, great families, you know, where everyone's together. They could have, their families have a history of addiction or not.
I mean, we talk about addiction, but what about the whole comorbidity issue that we kind of referenced? I mean, you're not a special ed program. I think we should make that very, very clear that you're not, although if someone was a recovering person and had ADD or ADHD or had a psychiatric disorder, which is a high percentage have emotional problems in living, that they would be addressed also, but they come through the system because primarily of their addiction. Is there a lot of like abuse in the families? I mean, what do you see? I mean, kind of as an example of when you have these community meetings or when you talk about the community meetings,
there's
what
quite
are
a
range of things that are there?
Like Sean said, you know, there's families that come in from the outside, look perfect, and you know, there's parents that are doing everything they need to be doing, and maybe there's a genetic predisposition and the kid is acting out. There's families that come in with severe physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. So the range of students is it covers the range, is really the best way to say it. Recovery, you know, we take a Minnesota model of looking at the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, and we address all of those. If students have severe psychiatric issues, our school really isn't going to be the place for them until they get stabilized. If they went through a psychiatric hospital and were discharged and were stable and could stay sober, then that would be requirements for admission. But really, you know, the drugs of abuse we see on average kids start using around 11 and 12, and alcohol and pot are usually the go-tos. They experiment with that and start dipping and dabbing with other things. Pharmaceuticals happen to be the drug of choice at the moment. And shockingly, there's a lot of heroin in this area at the moment. So kids are going from pharmaceuticals like Oxycontin, Percocets, and building a tolerance to that, and they're moving on in a really quick fashion. So we see kids really that are coming in. I say there's an unofficial level at the junior year when they've been abusing pot and alcohol either 5 days a week or daily, you know, for 18 months, and then they start dipping and dabbing and getting involved, and a parent will find out a legal situation or someone will reach out, and then they enter a program like ours, maybe going to inpatient or stepping down out of one or right into a program like Adolescent Advocates.
I know there's a unique difference between dealing with adolescents and dealing with adults. I mean, God knows, I've been around long enough to know that one. But I'm wondering, what are the distinct differences of adolescent use, you know, kind of like the pros and cons of adolescent drug use, when you compare it to, say, a more adult community? I mean, what is so unique about them that they need a special program? I mean, I kind of know the answer too, but
First of all, the peer factor
Peer pressure,
and peer pressure, but also the need to be included is very significant at that age. It's significant in any age, but definitely as you are developing, as a person is developing.
So you got self-image issues coming up.
Absolutely.
And wanting to be a part of the
Yes.
experience.
And also developmental issues, with the brain. The brain is, cannot totally, isn't totally developed, where, they're more likely to put some damage, be impulsive and damage themselves. And it really, more so than an adult who has a
And they have
grown
more of a
brain.
risk-taking kind of mentality. Adolescents,
Right.
Without a doubt.
I mean, and when you talk about where does it start, clearly in the school board when I was on, you see it at around 11 or 12-year-olds.
Yes.
So when you talk about prevention or introducing them to the concepts of drug and alcohol use, you really have to start in about the second grade. I mean, people always say, well, we start in middle school with our prevention programs. But one of the things that we tried to do, at least, and I'm sure that this comes up all the time, is that you really have to slide that down into almost the elementary school, because by middle school, they're pretty active in the sense of what's going on in our culture.
They've
In the
started
sense of-
dabbling. Certainly
Yeah.
by middle school, they are dabbling.
Alcohol, a lot of alcohol use, probably a little weed and smoking. I mean, this is fairly common. And then, some people believe in the domino effect. I'm not necessarily one who feels that there's a tremendous domino effect, but you get this kind of activity. Now, appreciate the fact that what you're saying is that, and you're moving through adolescence with all those issues of, ego and ego growth and strength and, and all of the kinds of self-image issues that come about in adolescence. So you can see where it could get fairly complicated and quite volcanic in the sense of what happens. I've often felt that the most difficult places to teach and to deal with adolescent or drug use is in the middle school.
Absolutely.
Because they're so, they're half big and half small, so to speak, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're just getting there and they're starting to blossom, so to speak. And, you have all these problems in 7th and 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And when they're in high school, they pretty much have their system down by then, if you know what I mean. So
Well, our students, we're anticipating, will be developmentally much more like middle schoolers.
That's what I think, too,
because
yeah.
they've had arrested development from drug use. And so our teachers have all come, they have secondary certification, but they all come with middle school experience, because that's really where our kids are. And while we can't serve kids who have severe psychiatric problems, we are certainly expecting a lot of co-occurring disorders, because you take away a kid's main method of coping, which has been their alcohol or drug use, those co-occurring disorders are going to pop
like
right out.
anxiety disorders,
Right.
depression.
Yes.
Right,
You know,
oppositional
they're-
defiance.
those two
all
are
of-
particularly common.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a normal state anyway of adolescence. You're kind of anxious and you
Sure.
get a little
Yes.
depressed because things aren't going well, and you add drugs into it, or alcohol, alcohol in particular, and you can get into a fairly volatile mix.
Can I add a piece on a unique? One of the unique features that we're going to have is we're going to have recovery coaches, which are kids that are in early recovery, but with at least 3 years. And through being active in the community, and to self-disclose, I've been sober for over 15 years, and so there's a lot of younger individuals that are interested in getting into the field and in the college process. And the recovery coaches, like the ones that I have been talking to that are interested and we would like to bring on board, are about from 18 to 22.
Wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Wonderful idea.
Yeah.
And there's one kid that I had in mind. It was really a chance happening about 3 months ago when we were in the works, and this kid was coming into my intensive outpatient group literally every other week with his teeth kicked in. He was just a scrapper. He'd go out, do his thing, and that's what would happen. And he was in and out and did inpatient and back and into his high school. And this young man began to develop his own program that he's trying to talk to the local high schools about, and he's going to come in, and that in itself is such a powerful influence for them, because like Sean had said, they're in their own club. No matter how good you think your clinical skills are, or how hip or slick or cool the therapist may think they are, they're in their own club. So when they see somebody that they can relate to that's their own age, and their recovery speak is what they need to hear. That being able to break down those defense mechanisms is like that compared to maybe a few sessions with a therapist.
We're doing that with the adult population with certified peer specialists. If you're familiar with it.
Right.
And in a sense, what you're talking about is a certified peer specialist who's 18.
At the adolescent
Right.
age,
17.
Right, why not?
Oh, no, I think it's a
Yeah.
wonderful idea,
Yeah.
and you should maybe work on maybe how we certify those adolescents in the
Yes.
sense of their skill levels and what they need to deal with.
That's a great
But
idea.
it's a clear thought to me is that, like, I'm too old to be talking to adolescents, even though I think I have a wonderful story.
Yeah.
I think I have a wonderful story. The reality of life is they just, so what you're saying is that, you know, a lot of the services, if you think of what's different, is it's almost like the adults do the supervision, but the people who are actually doing the day-to-day work, the hard work, are really what I call these adolescent certified kind of. So, you know, I think of this whole idea and I say, well, gee, it's wonderful to work, and I know the problems of older therapists have with younger people, and I've often said it's such a difficult population to work with. I mean, and I don't mean to be negative about it, but I wonder why. Why adolescents as opposed to the adult community, where, you know, you have a different kind of almost recovery paradigm, so to speak? You know, what brought you interested in this topic, for example?
It was really by accident, in a way, but not accident, but I was a few years sober, and I began working at a rehab, and I happened to be the youngest person there at the time. So their adolescent program was really small. So it was myself and another licensed clinician. So it was kind of like, you know, you have the most tolerance here to work with them, so they're all yours. So that was my job I'd come in the afternoon when they were done their therapeutic day and meet with them, kind of decompress, you know, get dinner, and then go to 12-step meetings. From that point on, you know, I was kind of hooked. It sounds cliche, but they keep you young, and it's the type of population that is challenging, and you're really not going to find a group of people that are more honest and will keep you humble than a group of adolescents in early recovery.
Well, that's true. That's true.
So they're really, it's just a fun group and a rewarding group to work with.
How about you, Sean? Because you're actually in the day-to-day activities with young people all the time.
Absolutely, all day long.
All day long, yes, all day long.
But I mean, kids are fun. Adolescents are fun. You know, they're more fun than adults, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
They are. I mean, if you work with them, they're funny.
They keep you young, in a sense.
Absolutely, they do.
I mean, that's what I like about teaching a community. I have younger people, and you know, and they kind of like instill you to kind of continue on.
Absolutely, and they're more challenging. You know, they challenge you more. They'll challenge ideas more. So they're just more fun all around, and you know, and they're. I mean, it's very rewarding intrinsically. You know, to work with younger people and see them grow and see them achieve things where they are in their life. That's when they really can go in a bunch of different directions. Whereas an adult, you know, won't necessarily, like, they'll be married, have a family, then get sober.
Yeah, which is a more typical adult model.
Yeah, and then, you know, they're not really, I mean, they're of course changing. You have to change everything when you get sober, pretty much. Right. But they're still in that mode, you know, where they stay in their marriage and, you know, with their kids, and it's just kind of more boring.
The nice thing about it, I mean, if recovery really takes place in adolescence and sticks, you actually feel that you've had an impact on generations in front of them, because they have maybe 50 years of activity, where typically, in my experiences in dealing with the adult community, they're 40, 45, you know, they've been, you know, sloshing around in their addiction for 20, 25 years. So I can appreciate that one of the nice things about working with adolescents is that you get the sense that you impact on the future in a much more meaningful way than you might, and you catch them before a lot of damage is done to when they get married and have children, and then they
Right.
become children of alcoholics and the drug and you get into that whole
Breaks the
family
cycle.
Recovery does
cycle.
stick. It does stick. And I wanted to add on what Sean was saying, because, you know, we're talking about fun, and they're all that. And, you know, and recovery is about, you know, living joyous, happy, and free, you know. So, and they naturally kind of, you know, have that. But the other piece is, I think most people would be blown away if they sat in one of our groups or had discussions with adolescents, like the way that they comprehend, understand, and pass on the message of recovery. And also, I mean, the concepts that they're taking on are pretty big in spirituality, you know, and honesty, openness, willingness, forgiveness. And, you know, they really soak it all up, and the support that they give one another is just extremely powerful. You know, it's a great group.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say from a social perspective as well, you can. I mean, the impact that you can have on an adolescent is significant.
It is.
You talk to a lot of kids who have dropped out, and sometimes, for a lot of them, it's been that they haven't been able to stay in school because of addiction or alcohol abuse. And so if you can catch a kid in that place and get them through high school and graduated, you know, not only are you impacting future generations, as you said, you're helping that kid, you're helping that, you know, we're helping our city have, you know, adults who are paying taxes and responsible instead of people who are needing services down the road.
I think it is a wonderful idea. I mean, I wish it totally blossoms into like
Oh, we hope
hundreds
so.
of students that you have in
Yeah.
your school.
Thank
And
you.
I know it's in Manayunk.
It's in
I think,
Manayunk.
they start.
We're opening in September. We're taking applications now. We have several students we're interviewing for our opening, and
let me return to the day in school for a moment. So we have the community meeting, which we started out, and then we were talking about all kinds of other things, and then we might have these little breakout groups, as you say.
Right.
So you're starting out with what, 12, 13 students?
we're starting out. We hope between 6 and 8 to start
Oh,
with, and
okay.
cap at 12 for the first year. And I do want to talk a little bit about the day because it
Yes.
is different, and I want to underscore that we are a school.
Right.
We have the recovery supports and therapeutic components, but we're, you know, a Pennsylvania accredited secondary school that can grant a diploma. We start the day at 9 o'clock, which is different than most high schools that I know of, because it's better for kids. It's, you know, better where adolescents are. It's more in keeping with their internal clocks. We go until 4 o'clock. We're offering an after-school program from 4 to 5:30 that we have a wonderful certified teacher organizing it. She's worked with the community mural arts program, and she's done writing programs with women's prisons in the area. So she has lots of skills with creative expression. But we have the regular classes: English, social studies, math, science, PE. We have PE every day, which is also something that, we have art and music, both several times a week, so that we're offering a lot of opportunity for creative expression. And the PE provides students with a chance to up their endorphin levels, which helps with addiction as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And any of the co-occurring issues.
Right.
The other piece that's real important for us, and I think Sean would agree with this, a lot of times our kids, adolescents in therapy, it takes them longer to get things sometimes. Not all the time, but just in average, you know. So one thing that we find is when the kids start getting sober, if it's 16, 17, 18, and they make a commitment, they're going to meetings, they have sponsors, and they're ready to continue life, they look at high school and they say, all right, well, you know, I've accumulated 6 credits of high school credits because I've been so truant, or I've been in placement, or I've been an inpatient in juvie. And Rebecca has developed an accredited accelerated program that you can speak more on.
Right, kids will have the opportunity. As Pete says, you know, we're talking to students who are coming in who should be juniors and have maybe 3 or 4 credits under their belt. For those very reasons that Pete listed, truancy, inpatient treatment, all of those things. We are working with an online school in Pennsylvania that will allow kids to quickly make up some of those credits, so that they won't still be in high school when they're 22.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is pretty daunting.
Yeah.
Well, that would be. a long time in high school.
Yes, it would be. More than I think any
I
of
don't
us
think
would
they
care to
be
do.
cheerleaders or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that at
yeah.
22. But I guess they could still be in high school. So the day goes on, and during the day when they have a particular problem, are they extracted from the class? Do they have an ongoing counselor that they see? What?
Do you want to speak to that?
Yes. Depending on the severity of the issue, it's really not on the teacher. The teachers are all very skilled and capable of intervening. But if we start addressing those issues in the classroom and it disrupts everything, not only does that have a snowball effect, but it's also just kind of the way things that they're used to is done. You know, again, it depends on the severity of it. But if there's a disruption, yeah, one of the recovery coaches and myself, I'm going to be there all day. We'll, you know, ask the individual to excuse themselves, and you know, we'll sit and deal with it until it's resolved, and they can go back and be in a balance, you know, in a classroom and be productive.
Sure.
You know, but we're not going to let them just kind of sabotage a class because they have a momentary, you know, resentment going on for some issue.
Sure. So there's like 12 starting. 12 or 15, did you say? They want to start?
We're hoping.
We're hoping.
We're hoping, yeah.
Where are you drawing them from? I mean, I know adolescent advocates would be one, and I assume the histories that will be coming will be primarily what you had mentioned, issues of recovery, et cetera. But are you working, do you have a network of?
Oh, we have an extensive network. Karen Treatment Center in Wernersville is working with us to make referrals. We've networked with many of the area adolescent treatment providers, but we're also working with public school districts who have identified students who are having a rough time and might need to leave the community for a while and come to our school. We're totally willing to open our doors for a student for a period and send them back. You know, independent schools in the area as well have been approaching us because they're seeing a ping pong effect. They send a kid to treatment, the kid comes back. In 2 or 3 months they've relapsed and they're sending them back to treatment. They see it as a win-win, that if they can send a student to us for a semester or a year, then they can return to their school and graduate under their name in a much more solid and stable place.
Right.
So public schools, treatment providers, treatment centers, we're networking with all of them.
How large do you think it's
Probation.
going to get?
Most schools around the country cap at about 50.
50? So it's a relative, in the sense of the problem, it's a relatively small school in the sense of the problem of addictions in adolescents.
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
I've had 2 people, though, already approach me about opening a school in Bucks County and one within the city, another one in the city when we have charter schools available to us again.
Right, but in the sense that a school like this could be in every district, like compared
yeah.
to the problem that's going on outside.
Oh, yeah.
And to have 12 kids, yeah.
Yeah.
It's small.
But we
Yeah.
we could have one of these in every district. There could be a recovery school in every district.
I think you know, it might be. Well, really, I think at the moment there's really epidemic levels of abuse going on. And as marijuana becomes more normalized, as it already is, as it becomes
More legal, as it
more
seems to be
legal.
moving towards.
Sure, you're going to see those numbers escalate. It's at a peak now. It's not really a peak though, it's just maintaining. It's more of a plateau. So is there a need for this in every district? I think that you could have 10 or 12 easily in each district.
In the sense of adolescent behavior, I don't know if I want to digress into this, but maybe I will for a moment. The legalization of marijuana, from the perspective of dealing with adolescents, how do you view that movement in the sense of its impact on what's going on in adolescence and in the high schools?
I view it as, well, you look at the most damaging drug out there at the moment, and it's legal, alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol, no question about it. Yeah.
Right. The drug of choice for adolescents is typically marijuana. That's usually, people all know, the gateway. I mean, that's true. And that's usually the beginning. It's very accessible. So as that continues, I think you'll see those rates climb. I think the biggest misunderstanding with marijuana today, because we have a lot of parents that come in and self-disclose that they use, And their idea is like, well, we did this and that back in the day. We try to encourage them to understand, and NIDA and all these government organizations have this research online. They say, check it out. It's not just your counselor or therapist that you can point a finger out and say he's crazy. Look it up yourself. It's easy. It's free. And the reality is that the marijuana is 10 times stronger than it was when they were smoking it when they were in high school.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it went from something like in the 60s when probably those parents in the 60s, 70s were smoking to something from 2% almost up to 10 or 12.
And higher.
It's almost like what used to be called in the 60s hashish, when they used to smoke it. So it has been,
yes.
And it is a mild hallucinogen, so
Correct.
it has all those hallucinogenic effects. It inhibits learning because it actually affects that part of the brain where the learning center is. So you have a lot of negatives, particularly unique to adolescents, as opposed to someone who might be smoking in their 40s, for example. I'm not saying that I'm supporting anyone smoking or the legalization, but all of the legalization discussion that's going on today and this thought of they'll make revenues and taxes and things like this really gets communicated to adolescents that even the adults thinks it's okay. I mean, they call it medical marijuana, and I don't necessarily want to get into the controversy as to whether it's right or wrong, but I think the image, the public image that comes across now in the sense of adolescence is not a real positive one in the sense of managing their life. Although, to be honest with you, in all my experiences on the school board when I was on it, alcohol was unbelievable, the amount of drinking that they do in their homes, and that is sanctioned almost by many of the parents, and then it leads logically into some of the other kinds of issues.
Agreed.
We didn't see a whole lot of heroin or opiates at that age group. You tend to see the marijuana, the alcohol, and maybe some of the designer drugs, filtering in, the kind of new drugs, as they say.
I'm part of a parents group that we all have had kids who have struggled with addiction, and I meet weekly with them, and time after time, that's what you hear from parents, that in the early days, they said, my kid, it's just pot. They're just doing some drinking on the weekends. And it took until the kids were in crisis for them to actually recognize that pot or alcohol was creating a huge problem.
Yeah.
Our mission isn't, we're not lobbying, we're not lawyers.
Yeah, I don't lobby.
We're trying to
I
give
agree
an
with you.
individual an opportunity and the best opportunity they have and all the tools they have to go out and succeed in their own recovery. Because as I said, it really is, and especially in that population, like swimming upstream.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
we can't, and I agree with you. I mean, that's not the business we're in, and so to speak. I mean, we really deal with the results of all of that. But you have to be impressed by the public cry for more and more use of legalization of different substances, which create all kinds of potential problems for adolescents, more than it does so much for the adult population.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the word impressed, but I know
Okay, you can use
our
a more
country,
stronger word if you like. Sure.
Our country has a long history of drug use, and so it's really not new. But the numbers are staggering.
They
I
are.
understand what you're saying. It's
staggering.
really staggering. And what happens is, the fact is, when parental permission parental permission and use correlate. When there's parental permission, it goes up. And parental permission can just simply be, kind of turning the cheek and not even just sitting down and talking. So even to parents out there, even that discussion, if you feel like it's falling on deaf ears, it isn't. They're hearing you, and they do need that.
Or just simple things like there's a party in your basement in your suburban little home, say, or wherever your home is, and you as a parent never go down there to check out what is going on. I mean, God knows I have 3 children, so I had to check out a lot, but I'm in the field. But, I mean, simple things like that, say, well, I didn't know that they were drinking down there, or I didn't know. I mean, so we almost say, go downstairs and have fun, and there's almost this kind of very, very much of an acceptance of alcohol as a kind of an entry level.
Also, just to go on with this, alcohol is accepted, by a lot. They think there's no big deal. Right. A lot of kids, like adolescents and people in college, like they believe, well, you know what, it's just pot, like pot's not a big deal. I can still do my schoolwork, I can still be active. And, if you're honest with yourself, like seriously,
Yeah.
you know, if you're seriously honest, you know, you're lazy when you smoke pot all
Oh
the
yeah.
time.
Well, there's the
You
whole
know, I mean,
motivational syndrome.
you know, some
Right.
people say, you know, I can type so much deeper, like this paper, like
Yeah.
I'm such a good writer
And
when I'm
think.
high. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's a
Think
bunch
heavily.
of baloney, man.
Yeah, it
so,
is.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be
Good point.
honest with yourself.
Well, yeah, and it is an issue that we'll revisit, I'm sure, many times. Well, I want to thank the whole three of you. I mean, you've been very, very helpful in the
Thank
sense
you.
of starting this kind of thing off. And I hope as you have students and as you get more experiences, maybe we could reconvene and talk a little bit about what the experience is like and how things are going for you.
That'd be great.
I
Thank
wish
you.
you the best of luck. I think it's a wonderful thought. And I wish you the best of success with it. And as I mentioned to you earlier when we met, and I'm going to end this session, is that use me in the sense of the school board that I was on, and I'll surely give you
Sure.
entry into that school district because I still know the superintendent fairly well.
Yep.
And we could maybe get some
Thank you.
referrals out of that district because they surely need them.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all we have for today's show. I want to thank our guest for joining us today. You have been watching the Tapestry of Life on CCP TV. If you have questions about the Department of Behavioral Health and Human Services, please feel free to contact me. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles at Community College of Philadelphia. Thank you for watching and see you next time.